The poor guy married a 65-year-old woman. 10 days later he was horrified to realize that life was not like a dream. It was dark and drizzling rain covered the small alley where Hung was living, in a shabby house at his age 22. Hung is a poor student in his final year of university, burdened with his father's debt. A man He has a bad reputation because of his deceitful tricks. In the past, his father was often asked to collect his debts, making both father and son's lives even more miserable. Hung had many times thought about dropping out of school to go to work, but still trying to hold on with the hope of changing the future. One day in the middle of the rain, Hung received the call from a strange phone number. The caller called herself Mrs. Van, invited him to a luxury cafe, to discuss important matters related to his family. Hung hesitated but then decided to go meet Mrs. Van, a wealthy woman about 65 years old, slim figure, elegant appearance, elegant, but the cold eyes from many years of traveling in the market, the careful layers of makeup on her face, probably made Cho look much younger, compared to her 65 years old, when Hung just sat down. She went straight to the point. She said, "Do you want to pay off your father's debt and have money to take care of Cho's future?" Hung was surprised by this opening statement. He did not understand why a stranger knew so much about his situation. Hung replied, "Whou, why do you know so much about my family's affairs?" Mrs. Van calmly replied that I have my own way. The important thing is that I can help you, but in return I need you agree with me on one condition. Hung, what condition? Mrs. Hong put the coffee cup on the table. Her eyes met his with power. "I'm this old but I've never had a husband or children. I'm very lonely. I want to taste what it feels like to have a husband, to have a companion. I want you to marry me, to become a suitable husband." Me method. Hung was so shocked that he almost dropped the teaspoon in his hand. He couldn't believe what he had just heard. A woman old enough to be his grandmother wanted to marry him. She was joking, right? "Why me?" she said calmly. "I'm not kidding. It's because you're still young and there's no strings attached, there's nothing, so I chose you. I don't need you to truly love me, I just need a companion. And is willing to do as I request, without asking questions." Hung silently tried to string together the whatever Mrs. Hong said. He wanted to refuse, but when he thought about father's debt, which weighed heavily on both of their lives, father and son, for so many years, "I have been wondering," Hung doubts that if I agree, what will I get? "Mrs. Hong, I will pay off all of father's debt, you will take care of all your education expenses, and after if I die, my property will be yours. You won't have to worry about money for the rest of your life." The offer is too attractive, but also full of danger. Hung sensed something was wrong with her plan, but he couldn't find the answer. Hung said, "If I agree to your conditions, she asked you to just be her husband. Me. Live with me, and do not betray or flirt with others. Until I die, all property will leave it to you. It's as simple as that." Hung hesitated. He felt pushed into a corner, but thinking that his father didn't have many more options. He caught a glimpse of the old woman at this age. Maybe Hung just exchange a few years of your youth. Maybe just a year or two later she will pass away. The day the hero will be free, it's not far away. Hung took a risk and got me to agree. A few days later a simple wedding was held. Only a few close people knew, and a few friends attended. Hung and Mrs. Van stood in front of the ceremony altar. However, the news of this strange wedding was quickly spread to everyone in the village, whispering, "Curious because they don't understand why a young man would marry an old woman like Mrs. Van." Some praise, others criticize. Some think that Hung is a gold digger. Some say that he was so rich that he was greedy for young men. Some people said that he owed his debt to his father. Many rumors spread throughout the neighborhood. Village was originally quiet. On the wedding night, when Hung entered the room, Mrs. Van sat there with cold eyes. "Mrs. Van, you don't need to act uncomfortable, just rest assured to live here, then you will understand the real purpose." My words. This sentence made Hung feel like there was a cold wind running down his spine. He didn't know. He just walked in a relationship full of twists and turns, with shocking secrets ahead. One day after the wedding, Hung officially moved into Mrs. Van's villa from a shabby little house in the countryside. Large, fully equipped, feels like in a few years, This entire property will belong to you, making him happy for a moment, but besides that distance from Hoa, he could not dispel the feeling of coldness and insecurity in him. Hung tried to integrate into the new environment, but she still maintained a very distant. Even though they both lived under the same roof, she always kept her distance and only appeared at meals. Orweenthea was an important matter. The villa was large but quiet, with only a few maids moving around quietly. Hung called the owner. No, wife, why does this house have so few people? The lady coldly replied, I was just living alone. Everyone in the family is gone. Children and grandchildren are living abroad. You just need to focus.